Hi, everyone. Lisa and Dan here from Fireside Strategic. We're on a mission to build a warmer, more human, and more profitable business world. In the Fireside Chat series, we're celebrating leaders that combine strategy and humanity to help build great organizations. Right now, we're happy to chat with David Simmonds, chairman at HCM Metrics. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure. It's a delightful opportunity I have at the beginning of this new year to head into all the opportunities that are facing us at this time.
I love it. I love it. David, right before we started recording this interview, you started telling us that you have this incredible mission in your work. Could you tell the audience a little bit about your mission?
Yeah, my destiny in life has been for the last 20, 30 years. My passion in life is to enable individuals and teams and organizations to fulfill their potential. I've worked as a consultant in many places on 6 continents, and I embrace diversity and equity and inclusion and belonging. But in the end, people are people, and it's about humanity. And it's about bringing the humane back into human resources. And that moment when we help people to develop and change, that moment when the light comes on or the penny drops, there's a legacy there. It's sustainable. And you know that you've changed them forever. So it's holding their hand. It's about relationship. It's walking on this adventure life with them so that they can go where they want to go. They can dream the dream. They can become the dream. And that's fantastic. I love all that.
When did you first get an inkling that this was your destiny, that this was your mission?
It was a cliche, actually. I was in school and I wanted to be a school teacher. And I did the classic teacher training and found that actually, as far as I'm concerned, schools are a nightmare. Schools are a jungle. And I found that me and kids, I've got 4 of my own and I've got 6 grandchildren, but teaching is hard. And I have so much admiration, particularly during coronavirus, for everybody who's involved in teaching. However, I then very early on moved from teaching to training and went to a very large telecoms provider. And we did lots of good training and management development, organization development stuff. I moved into our National Health Service, which is the largest employer in Europe. And we did a load of management development stuff, organization development. And then I moved from there to some very large financial services companies. And again, I got to the top as a director and everything and different kinds of training. I moved from that into management consultancy and OD and HR consultancy. And I've worked in many different continents. But in the end, it's all about saying, okay, where does it hurt? What are the pinch points? Where's the organization suffering? How can we help you to help yourself? Because what have you tried already? And what you've been trying to fix this issue. And in going forward from here, I believe passionately, every organization is going to need to change. Whether it's going to be mergers and acquisitions, downsizing, offshoring, certainly, as we know, remote working is here to stay to a greater or lesser extent. And people are they're caused to ask the big questions. What's it all about? Where are we going? What about this meaning? I do know that millennials are asking the question about work. And it's not the cliche work-life balance. It's saying work's important, but it's not all there is. And now that I've been working at home, I spend more time with the family or in the garden or going for walks. That's given me a different outlook on life. And I want to partner with organizations that are asking those questions. I want to be able to help people say, what's stopping us? Why can't we?
I'm so curious. How do you help people go from asking, what are we? What's the purpose, to actually implementing some things, some tactical things in the company that help make that come true?
Well, I thank you, Lisa. I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's all very well coming up with the ideas and the concepts, but making the change happen is where the rubber hits the road. I think people would like to be able to change. organizations would really like to be innovative and creative. And now, because of the coronavirus, and there's been somebody's pressed the pause button, people are saying, why can't we? Well, let's try it. Let's have some fun. If it works, great. If it doesn't, great. At least we've tried. It's about, I think, taking risks is now on the table. A lot of people, including those in HR, have been fairly risk averse. But now when people are being faced up to the realities of life, people are saying, okay, what's stopping us? Let's give it a go. Let's have some fun. Let's try something different. And that's all I need. Certainly working with people in HR. Many of them are wanting to move. In the past, many people in HR have been conservative, responsive. Many people, for all the right reasons, have been reactive. And it's been a kind of transactional approach, hiring and firing and benefits and employee relations. And yet at the same time, a lot of people, a lot of organizations, they've said, we want a seat on the board. We want to be in there with the C-suite. The problem is that shift that you've just talked about is big because it's a paradigm shift. You see, the people in the boardroom talk a different language. They're talking graphs and charts and spreadsheets and numbers. And I have a hypothesis that most people in HR hate the math teacher. And so what I want to do is to hold their hand and say, don't worry about the numbers. Don't worry about your HCM platform or your HR information system. We'll do that for you. But we'll give you the evidence to prove that what you've been doing is effective. We can have benchmarking, we can have trends, we can have predictive analytics, and this will help you to make that shift from a very much a transactional approach to a transformational approach, leading strategic organizational change. And I think the data, the analytics, the metrics will be part of that solution.
I love that you think transformationally, you realize that HR is transactional, but in order to make that transformation happen, we have to use numbers. We have to speak the language that those who will be involved, key stakeholders, speak, right? And so I love that sort of diplomatic approach. Curious to learn a little bit about, in a bit more detail, about how you do all of that. So for you, measuring is really, really important, right? Can you take us behind the scenes a little bit about how that all works?
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, I've been involved in HR analytics for the last 5 years. And to begin with, I thought, how does that work? How do you get HR and analytics in the same sentence, let alone in the same room? And yet gradually, people are embracing the reports that are coming out of the HCM platforms, the big people like SAP and Oracle and Workday and Cornerstone, who between them have got about a quarter to a third of the whole market. And there's metrics coming out their ears. The problem is that many of these providers have given us software which, with the best will in the world, they're over-engineered, complicated, expensive, and people in HR don't know necessarily how best to use them. So what I've done, and my company's done, is to embrace the benefits of this new international standard, ISO 30414. It comes pre-packaged with a set of 11 core areas which people in HR have been doing for years. Leadership, diversity, benchmarking, succession planning, diversity, all those kind of things. But there are 60 metrics. And for the first time, we can measure the ROI of HR. And immediately that gives us an edge, because any organization that's going for excellence or quality or reputation can get this stamp of approval. The standard was developed by representatives of 25 countries who were meeting for 3 years in Geneva, Switzerland. And they've come up with this robust international objective standard, which is applicable to every organization in the public, private, and voluntary sector in every country. So that now at last, we can compare apples and apples rather than apples and pears. You were talking about stakeholders. In the United States, there has been a change with the SEC regulations. And one of the benefits of that is that it's addressing the needs of stakeholders. Initially, there's two big aspects. One is called the principles-led approach. And Jay Clayton, the chairman of the SEC, said he wants metrics to be applied consistently from quarter to quarter and from year to year. And secondly, he hopes those metrics would apply across sectors and industries. And the metrics he wants are not just quantitative, but also qualitative. And the principles-led approach means that what would any good organization be reporting on internally to their stakeholders? Because through this disclosure of the evidence about the human capital in an organization, HR can now affect the bottom line. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit here. And the KPIs, the KRAs, whatever is driving the organization, HR can help them get there. Personally, I think that the future is going to be different. It's going to include technology and it's going to include HR, and we bring the two together. But there's another group of stakeholders which are external to the organization. They're called investors or potential investors. And just as in a court of law where there needs to be full and frank and clear disclosure, so it's now going to happen with HR. And that's called materiality. What would a normal investor expect to see or expect to be given? Let me give you an example. Let's say an organization has 5 VPs who are coming up for retirement in the next 5 years. That needs to be known internally in terms of succession planning, but externally, an investor would certainly need to know about that.
Yeah. Access to information is so essential. And we're so used to investors making decisions in the public and private markets without adequate transparency, particularly in this realm. And so it sounds like this change in the US, this first change applies to public companies, and then perhaps private companies are later on down the line.
I think it's applicable across the board, and it will be also applicable to authorities and agencies and dare I say government departments and health sector and education and defense, the emergency services. It will even be applicable to the NGOs and the charities, because it's all about people in the end. It's not about the sector, it's not about the product or the service. What is it that the people are doing that can add value to the organization? Whether it's share value or market share doesn't matter. But what is it that people can do that makes it different? And that's where HR comes in, because HR have been doing this for years, but they've had their hands tied behind their back because they couldn't prove it. But now we have a set of metrics and a framework which is available, which we can help organizations with. So HCM Metrics is currently consulting with many different organizations. I have probably 3, 4, 5 meetings a day, and a third of those are international. In the last few days, I've been speaking. I just came off a call with somebody in Ghana, and he was talking about Africa. And yesterday I was talking with people in Myanmar, and I regularly have contacts with people on the Indian subcontinent. Because this is about people and it's about organizations, and it's not about the West, it's not about developed nations, it's about helping people to drive organizational change. And now we can prove it. Now we got the metrics.
I love that. I think that these metrics around the ROI of HR are such an important input into decision making. What I'm curious about is, now that this input is coming in, what do you expect the output will be, or what have you already been seeing? How are organizations changing as a result of these metrics?
Thank you. You've hit the nail on the head. Let me give you an example. I was talking to a chief exec recently, and he said, David, this is fantastic. We love this, but we can't afford it. I said, well, I think you probably could. He said, no, it's not in the budget. And I said, of course it's not in the budget. You haven't planned for this, but it will be in next year's budget. He said, but we just haven't got the money. I said, well, with all due respect, you do because you're wasting money. And he was shocked. And I said, let me show you what I mean. I don't mean to offend you, but currently you're wasting money. And HR, who was sitting near, they were nodding already. And I said to the chief exec, have you had a middle manager leave in the last year? He said, well, yes, of course. And I said, and so they were earning 40, 50K? He said, yes. How do you know? And I said, well, you know, we know about this stuff. I said, all that knowledge has walked out the door, probably to your competitor. He said, yeah, I know. And then I said to him, how much would it cost to replace that person? He said, and he looked to HR, how much would it cost? And she said, I've been telling you, 75% of payroll. He said, what? And then I said, and what's your staff turnover rate amongst your middle managers? He said, I think 15%. He wasn't sure. I said, okay, well, let's say 15%. Would you like us to help you reduce that by 1 percentage point? He said, can you? I said, no, but HR can, and we'll help her to help you, because that's where you'll save money. And immediately he got it. You see, I think in the past, HR have tended to talk in terms of their own vocabulary, their own mission, their own vision. We need to ramp it up so we're talking business language, commercial language, the things which chief execs need to hear. And that's all about the KPIs, the KRAs, whatever they happen to be. So by reducing 1 percentage point on your labor turnover, increasing job retention, that's megabucks. And HR knows how to do that, and we will give them the ammunition to prove that what they're doing is good.
There has long been this disconnect between HR and the rest of virtually every organization they're in, because they don't speak the same language. Data is a way to bring them together. So it isn't just that you're enabling HR to make the case for what so many of us know is essential organizational change. You're helping all organizations work more effectively together, because when any other stakeholder can understand HR, they understand people and they understand their company in a deeper way.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I would push that further, because both of you have used words this afternoon, which I would just want to tease out. You've used the words like data and information. Data is the raw stuff, the binary, the ones and the noughts, and the basic stuff. Information is actually choosing which data to use and how to apply it. And I would then go further and talk about knowledge. A few years ago, people were talking about knowledge management. Well, knowledge is information interpreted in the line of the culture and the organization that it finds itself. And personally, I think there's an overriding element, and that's called wisdom. And that's the ethical, moral framework in which we find ourselves.
That's so beautiful. Can you tell us a few examples of projects that you've done where you've really helped HR speak the language, get the right data, communicate the right information, get to the right knowledge, and then live up to the correct wisdom? Would love to just see how this comes to life.
I've worked in a number of different organizations around the world. I've been fortunate in many ways. So in the banking and financial sector, for example, I'm not going to name names, but I will say that in the banking and financial services sector, we helped there was a very large organization, global organization, where myself and one of my associates, we went in and we brought in a completely new leadership development program. And we turned the design of that on its head. And we predicted the outcomes of that leadership development program before we even began. My specialism is learning and development. And often with those kind of programs, you do it hoping it's going to be right. And afterwards, you look backwards and see to what extent the evaluation and validation proved the objectives. What we did, we turned that on its head and we said, we are going to design this program, which was an executive leadership program in this huge organization, which everybody would have heard of. And we designed it in such a way in order to change the leadership and the outcomes going forward. And we did it over 18 months and proved it. And their performance went up, their loyalty went up, their engagement went up, and inevitably that hits productivity every time.
Beautiful. Those are fantastic, fantastic stories. Curious, we began this interview with a conversation about 2021, and you talked about how excited you were about this upcoming year. I'm curious, what are some of your goals for this year in terms of sort of how you want to grow your company, what you want to achieve next? Curious to learn a bit more about your goals for 2021.
I'm excited and frightened at the same time, personally and with my organization. I was describing to somebody the other day the growth of the organization, and I've lit the blue touch paper now and I can't stop it. There will be fireworks. I'm increasingly receiving phone calls and emails and invitations for webinars because people are now, they've got it. I have spent the last 2 years putting together the marketing plan, and I've now got people coming to me for the first time in those 2 years, and people now get it about HR analytics. And personally, the growth is exponential. We've always been aligned to remote working, even before COVID. Geography is not a problem. We are an international global organization with an international global product. There's a slight issue with time zones with Australia, but even that we can overcome. So growth will be massive, and that's what frightens me a bit, because let's say I was to manage to get ISO 30414 into Walgreens. That's been in the paper today. I don't know if you've heard, but they're separating some of their the way they work. They're linked with a large pharmaceutical retail outfit in the UK called Boots, and some of that separating with the alliance and so on. So going forward, if I got this into Walgreens, immediately their competitors would want it as well, and the whole of the supply chain would need it in addition. It's gonna go skyward very, very quickly. Let's say, I know GSK, GlaxoSmithKline, and AstraZeneca, and Pfizer. They're obviously in the vaccination business. As soon as one of those organizations sees the need to get the stamp of approval on their human capital, and we get them certified against this standard, it'd go like that. And that's just pharmaceuticals. I could say telecoms or oil and gas or, yeah.
Sounds like a powerful growth trajectory, lots of excitement. People are starting to get the message, and so excited for them to get that message, and so excited for you to realize the potential, not just for all these people, but the potential for your own company. It's super exciting.
I mentioned that I was speaking to a guy from Ghana today. He works in electricity supply. It's the national electricity grid supply business. And he's excited. Just a month ago, I was speaking to a fisheries company out of Norway, and they operate in the UK. In Scotland, they have 50 fish farms, and it's the world's largest producer of salmon. And they're both interested. So it's not the sector, it's not the organization, it's the people. And as I mentioned, every organization will at least need to address the need for change in some way going forward. So the opportunity is ripe. People are asking the big questions. How can we do this better? Unfortunately, in the last year, many bad decisions have been made. Chief execs have said to HR, right, chop it by 10% or 30% or whatever. And my question would be, well, why 10? Why not 11? Or why 30 and not 29? Going forward, we need to enable HR to be far more strategic, to have what we call contingency plans, so that at the next pandemic, and there will be one, or oil spillage, or crash on the dollar, and there will be one, HR, instead of doing a knee-jerk, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, they just reach for that file, which they hope they would never use, and they will turn to page 37 and say, right, that's what we do. In addition, and I don't tell many people about this, so keep it quiet, keep this to yourself. Our organization is also in the business of looking forward. The reporting and the standards which we are offering is inevitably backward looking. This is what the organization's achieved. There will be opportunity to compare and contrast with other organizations. But in addition, what we do is something called predictive analytics. In fact, we go to level 5 and it's called prescriptive analytics. With an organization, once we got access to their data, and by the way, in many organizations, that's at least 3 different silo sets, HR and IT and finance, and we bring them together. We can say to the chief executive about next year. We can talk to the people at the top about what's going to happen. At the moment, they use a blank sheet of paper, or they say, well, it's this year plus 10%, I think. We can make that more specific. We use their data, we don't change it, we merely put it through our machines with some fairly sophisticated software and statistics and so on. And we can say this time next year, how many people have been promoted? How many people have left because they weren't promoted? How many people have been on leadership development programs and what they thought of it and have they applied it? We can even tell them how many women this time next year will be on maternity leave and they haven't even conceived yet. It's using big data, which has been applied in many industries, in logistics and distribution and finance and marketing. We're applying big data and some fairly sophisticated modeling to the people, and that's going to save megabucks.
Yeah. The world needs this, and so it's been such a privilege to send this message to our community of C-suite execs. As we come towards the end of our time together, David, we had a great conversation about HR and business and the future of those things. Curious to end on a fun note, to end on a very human note. Curious what's fun for you when you're not changing HR and the future of business. What do you do for fun?
I do lots of things for fun. I love travel, and that's been curtailed at the moment. So I do virtual travel on the computer. I enjoy our family and grandchildren. I enjoy delving into my family tree. I love all the shows on about forensic science. I love detectives, novels, but in the end, my fun comes with my wife, and every day is new. And we can say, today we can start again. Today, there is a silver lining in the cloud. Personally, my Christian faith helps me with that. And I know that there's a hope and a future. So 2021 will be different from 2020 because we can decide. We cannot change the past, but we can change the future if we want to enough.
That's such a beautiful message. David, I love how your combination of optimism and looking forward with light and your intellectual curiosity and your love of people, it moves through your work and business, but also into your personal life. It really shines through in everything you do. So thank you so much for sharing all that with us today.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity. And if the listeners want to take this forward in any way, just look us up on the internet, HCM Metrics, and I'll be delighted to be in touch.